Imagine waking up as Cleopatra, the last queen of Egypt, surrounded by the splendor of her palace at sunrise. Welcome to Time Frame Histories for Sleep, where we drift into the day-to-day life of history's most powerful woman. Before her story was written, the river had already known her and whispered her name to the sands. Her story was written not only in papyrus scrolls, but in the hearts of those who saw her reign. Cleopatra, last of the Ptolemies, queen of Egypt and daughter of the Nile. In her eyes lived the wisdom of the ancients and the ambition of empires. She spoke in many tongues, ruled with intellect and charm, and was called both goddess and woman. Some saw her as enchantress, others as scholar, all knew her as queen. Her kingdom stretched from desert sands to shining sea, breathing in rhythm with the Nile. Every sunrise began the same, yet each was different in the eyes of the goddess queen. But what did a day in her reign truly look like? This is one of those days, a single breath in the life of Cleopatra. The sky above the Nile begins to pale, streaked with rose and gold as the first birds stir among the reeds. The marble terraces of the royal palace catch the early light, their columns glowing softly in the dawn haze. Servants move silently through shadowed corridors carrying bronze basins filled with steaming rose water. An attendant opens carved cedar shutters, letting the light spill across a room draped in silk. Cleopatra awakens and sits upright, the sunlight touching her face as the perfume of lotus fills the air. Her handmaidens approach, bowing deeply before beginning the morning cleansing ritual. They pour warm water scented with rose and lotus petals over her shoulders, steam curling into the cool air. The water glitters on her skin as an attendant dries her gently with fine linen cloths. An ivory comb dipped in almond oil is drawn through her dark hair until it shines. Meanwhile, a royal scribe kneels nearby, reading reports of the Nile's water level and the state of the granaries. She listens without turning, her expression calm, absorbing the rhythm of each word. Another attendant brings a golden tray holding freshly pressed pomegranate juice and dates. She takes a slow sip, her eyes resting on the horizon beyond the open balcony where the Nile glimmers. Outside, the distant call of fishermen drifts through the air as sails catch the morning wind. Inside, servants light small alabaster lamps filled with scented oil, deepening the warmth of the room. A soft melody of flutes begins from the adjacent hall, a signal for the morning audience to prepare. Cleopatra stands, her robe of linen falling in smooth folds as she moves toward the mirror of polished bronze. She studies her reflection, the calm authority already forming in her gaze. A servant presents a small bowl containing finely ground malachite powder for eye paint. Before applying it, she dips her finger in perfume oil and anoints her temples, whispering a prayer to Isis. The faint hum of the palace grows as guards change posts and distant doors open to the courtyard. Cleopatra moves toward the balcony, the breeze lifting a strand of her hair as she looks upon the awakening city. She closes her eyes for a moment, breathing in the scent of the Nile mixed with the perfume of lotus gardens. Behind her, attendants arrange scrolls and letters on a carved wooden desk for the day's business. The royal scribe enters again, this time bearing the names of foreign envoys awaiting audience. She listens carefully, then gestures for the preparations to continue, her tone steady and assured. Outside the palace, the sounds of the marketplace begin to echo faintly, blending with the calls of distant priests. She turns back from the balcony and nods once more to her attendants to complete her adornment. The day has begun. The queen is ready to be seen by her world. The soft music of flutes fades as Cleopatra steps toward the center of her private dressing chamber. Her handmaidens kneel, unveiling chests filled with pigments, perfumes, and fine jewels from across the empire. The air grows rich with the scent of myrrh, rose, and sweet cinnamon oil as the ritual of adornment begins. Cleopatra raises her hands, allowing the linen robe to slip from her shoulders as her attendants begin anointing her skin. Each motion is deliberate and ceremonial, as if the act of beauty itself were an invocation of divine power. A servant dips a fine brush into powdered malachite and outlines the queen's eyes in deep green arcs. Her gaze sharpens in the mirror-polished bronze, every movement a reflection of control and grace. Another handmaiden carefully applies crushed red ochre to her lips, mixing it with honey for luster. Gold dust is gently blown across her shoulders to catch the morning light, giving her skin a radiant glow. Her hair, thick and black as obsidian, is divided into sections and braided with strands of gold thread. They coil the braids upward, forming a crown-like shape held by an ivory comb engraved with falcon wings. An attendant places a delicate net of fine gold chains over her hair, set with emerald and carnelian stones. Cleopatra lifts a golden pendant shaped like a cobra, symbol of the living goddess, and clasps it around her neck. Bracelets of lapis and turquoise slide down her arms with soft chimes as she moves. Her robe of fine linen is replaced by one woven with golden threads, embroidered with lotus patterns. She sits before the bronze mirror again, studying the transformation that blends beauty with authority. Her attendants lower a headdress of gold in the shape of a vulture with outstretched wings, symbol of divine motherhood. A final touch. A delicate veil of transparent linen is draped lightly across her shoulders. The queen rises, her reflection framed by columns carved with lotus and papyrus motifs. Each piece of ornamentation serves not vanity but power, a visible manifestation of her divine right. She moves with slow grace to the incense altar, where the smoke rises in thin white ribbons. She dips her fingers into a bowl of blue lotus oil, tracing a symbol of protection over her heart. A priestess enters silently, placing a sacred amulet on a velvet cloth before her feet. Cleopatra bows her head slightly, a gesture both of reverence and command. Outside, the palace drums sound softly, announcing the approach of foreign envoys. She turns slightly, the gold of her gown catching the light like liquid fire. Her attendants step back and kneel. Silence fills the chamber. For a moment, she simply stands, breathing in the quiet power of her image. Then she steps toward the great doors, ready to face the world beyond the palace walls. The palace doors open, and golden light floods the corridor leading to the morning hall. Cleopatra steps forward, the echo of her sandals on polished stone blending with distant harp notes. The morning hall awaits her, its open arches overlooking the Nile bathed in golden mist. Servants lay out a low table of ivory and ebony, draped in embroidered linen. Fresh fruit gleams in bowls of bronze. Pomegranates, figs, grapes, and slices of melon chilled in snow from the mountains. A scribe reads the schedule of the morning audience as Cleopatra takes her seat upon a cushioned divan. Philosophers from the Museum of Alexandria bow deeply before her, robes brushing the mosaic floor. She greets them in fluent Greek, her tone warm yet commanding. Silver cups of watered wine are poured, and the fragrance of crushed mint fills the air. Cleopatra breaks a piece of barley bread and offers it to one of the scholars beside her. They speak of tides and stars, of how the Nile's rhythm mirrors the heavens. Cleopatra listens intently, her fingers tracing a constellation carved into a bronze platee. A mathematician unrolls a papyrus showing geometric diagrams of the Great Library's new studies. The queen leans forward slightly, her eyes sharp with curiosity. She gestures for a servant to bring her stylus, sketching a correction onto the parchment herself. A faint smile plays across her lips as the scholars exchange astonished glances. From the courtyard comes the sound of fountains and the rustle of palm leaves in the breeze. Cleopatra lifts a cup of honeyed wine, the gold of the liquid glowing in the light. She turns to a priest of Isis seated nearby and asks about the upcoming festival rites. The priest bows, describing processions, music, and offerings planned for the goddess. She nods, calculating the political value of the ceremony as much as its spiritual weight. A messenger enters quietly, bowing low before handing a scroll sealed with red wax. Cleopatra breaks the seal and scans the contents, her expression unreadable. A moment passes. She sets the scroll aside and resumes the conversation as if nothing had changed. A young poet recites verses comparing her to Isis rising at dawn. She listens, smiling faintly, her eyes distant as if seeing the goddess herself. The meal ends as a musician plucks a lyre, echoing through the marble hall. Cleopatra rises, adjusting the folds of her robe, and gives a quiet order to summon the next delegation. As she walks from the hall, the light glances off her crown, casting a golden halo that follows her into the day. The throne room of the Palace of Alexandria awakens as officials gather beneath the painted ceiling of blue and gold. Cleopatra enters through the bronze doors, flanked by guards in white linen with bronze cuirasses, polished to a mirror shine. The courtiers kneel as she takes her place on the throne shaped like a lotus in bloom. Her throne overlooks the great hall with its mosaic floor showing the map of Egypt and the Nile winding toward the delta. A herald strikes a bronze staff 3 times, and the session begins. The first petitioner, a merchant from Thebes, steps forward with tribute of alabaster jars filled with scented oils. Cleopatra listens, one hand resting on the carved arm of her throne, the other gesturing with subtle grace. She decrees a reduction in port tariffs to encourage trade, her voice calm yet decisive. The merchant bows low, pressing his forehead to the floor before backing away in reverence. Next comes a delegation of farmers bringing offerings of wheat, symbol of Egypt's prosperity. Cleopatra rises, takes a single stalk, and studies it as if weighing the health of her kingdom. She nods approvingly, ordering that irrigation channels be repaired before the next flood of the Nile. A Roman envoy is then announced, his arrival stirring a faint ripple through the court. Cleopatra's expression does not change. She gestures for him to approach. The envoy presents a letter from the Senate of Rome, sealed with the mark of the eagle. She reads it silently, her eyes scanning each line before she sets it aside. Her reply is measured and poised. Egypt remains a friend of Rome, but free in her own sovereignty. The envoy bows stiffly, his lips tight with forced diplomacy. Cleopatra turns to her vizier, discussing the latest grain exports and temple accounts. The vizier bows, promising to update the records before nightfall. A distant thunderclap rolls from the direction of the sea, and all eyes glance briefly toward the tall open windows. Cleopatra remains unmoved, her calm presence restoring focus in the hall. Two soldiers kneel to report disturbances among desert caravans near the eastern border. Cleopatra questions them briefly, her tone sharp but fair. She orders reinforcements to be dispatched and a messenger sent to the border fortress at Pelusium. The queen's command echoes across the marble, final and unquestioned. At last, she signals the end of the audience with a single nod. Officials depart in orderly lines, scrolls tucked beneath their arms. Cleopatra remains seated for a moment, gazing toward the open sea beyond the balcony arches. Cleopatra steps into the palace gardens where the air smells of lotus and myrrh. Servants spread a linen canopy above her as the sun reaches its highest point. A gentle breeze carries the scent of papyrus reeds from the palace pools. Cleopatra pauses beside a pond where sacred ibises wade through shallow waters. She feeds a small falcon perched on her wrist, the bird trained to carry messages to the harbor. Her chief priest of Isis approaches, bowing low before her. They walk together toward the temple gate, surrounded by carvings of divine queens. The scent of burning kaifi rises from the altar steps as they enter. Inside, the air cools and echoes with the slow rhythm of sistrum bells. Cleopatra removes her sandals and kneels before the statue of Isis. Her lips move in silent prayer, asking for clarity and strength to rule wisely. The priest pours sacred water over her hands from a carved alabaster vessel. She rises, takes a lotus flower and places it at the feet of the goddess. Musicians begin a slow melody on harps and flutes, filling the space with sacred harmony. A circle of priestesses moves gracefully around her, their white robes flowing like water. Cleopatra lifts a golden bowl of honey and milk as an offering to the gods. The priest chants blessings invoking Isis and Hathor, guardians of the throne and love. Cleopatra's eyes glisten as she repeats the ancient words, voice soft yet powerful. She places a small golden scarab into a bowl of sand as a sign of renewal. The priest sprinkles perfumed oil into the fire, flames turning blue for an instant. A low murmur of prayer spreads among the attendants, echoing like distant waves. Cleopatra turns toward the open door where sunlight floods back in, washing the temple in gold. Outside, the air is warm and the sounds of the garden return, bees, water, and songbirds. She walks slowly along the garden path, lined with papyrus scroll motifs carved in stone. Her guards follow at a respectful distance, shields glinting under the sun. She stops by a fountain shaped like the wings of Horus, dipping her fingers into the cool water. A young attendant brings her a silver tray of pomegranate seeds and figs. Cleopatra smiles faintly, tasting the sweetness of the fruit as if savoring the earth's blessings. She turns toward the horizon where the Nile glimmers beyond the palace walls. With a final glance at the temple, Cleopatra whispers a vow to protect her kingdom as the gods protect her. The palace courtyard glows under the fierce midday sun as Cleopatra prepares for her voyage. Her royal barge waits by the palace dock, its prow gilded and carved into the shape of a lotus. Servants carry amphorae of wine, baskets of figs and scrolls filled with maps and records. Cleopatra walks down the stone steps, her white silk gown moving like water around her ankles. She steps aboard the barge, greeted by the captain who bows deeply with hand across chest. The oars dip into the Nile, their rhythm slow and steady as the voyage begins. The breeze carries the scent of lotus and date palms as the sound of water fills the air. Cleopatra reclines beneath a canopy woven with gold threads, shaded from the blazing light. Her advisors gather nearby, unfurling papyrus maps across a low cedar table. They speak of harvests, tax routes, and the progress of temple restoration in Thebes. Cleopatra listens quietly, her gaze drifting to the far horizon where the desert meets the blue sky. Along the shore, peasants wave and kneel as the royal vessel passes. She gestures for the musicians to play, and the soft melody of flutes rises over the river. The music mingles with the rhythm of the oars, creating a song of water and power. Cleopatra dips her hand into the Nile, watching droplets fall like jewels back into the river. Her attendants offer her cool water, perfumed with rose petals. The queen sips slowly, her thoughts hidden behind her calm expression. In the distance, fishermen cast their nets, their voices echoing faintly across the river. Cleopatra watches them with curiosity and respect, the river being Egypt's true lifeblood. A poet aboard the barge begins to recite verses dedicated to the Nile and its eternal flow. The words weave through the sound of waves, echoing like a sacred hymn to the gods. Cleopatra smiles, moved by the beauty of the language and the river's calm. Her barge passes beneath the shadow of tall papyrus, stands swaying in the hot wind. A young noblewoman reads aloud reports from Alexandria, her voice clear over the hum of insects. Cleopatra listens, nodding slightly as she dictates her responses to a nearby scribe. The barge drifts past a small temple dedicated to Sobek, god of the crocodile. Cleopatra raises her hand in salute, honoring the ancient power of the river's gods. The afternoon light begins to soften, turning the river surface to molten gold. Cleopatra closes her eyes for a moment, feeling the pulse of the river beneath her. The voyage continues southward, oars dipping in perfect unison beneath the fading sun. The royal barge glides into the private dock as the late afternoon sun softens to amber light. Cleopatra steps ashore, her sandals touching cool marble as musicians greet her arrival. She walks through a shaded colonnade lined with papyrus columns carved with hieroglyphs. In the Great Hall, scholars from the Library of Alexandria await her with scrolls and tablets. Cleopatra greets them warmly, her voice calm but commanding, fluent in Greek and Egyptian. A philosopher unrolls a scroll depicting celestial charts of the night sky. They discuss the stars, how their movements might predict floods of the Nile. Cleopatra listens intently, tracing the lines of the constellation with a golden stylus. Another scholar presents her with a vial of new perfume distilled from lotus and frankincense. She inhales softly, recognizing the blend as both sacred and sensual. At another table, a physician discusses herbal mixtures used to treat fevers. Cleopatra joins the discussion, recalling her own experiments with aromatic oils. She orders samples to be prepared for testing on rare fabrics and gemstones. The air inside the hall grows thick with the scent of resin, ink, and honeyed wine. A Greek mathematician steps forward, unfurling diagrams of pyramidal proportions. They speak of harmony between art and power, of how beauty mirrors divine order. Cleopatra smiles faintly, her intellect illuminated by curiosity and control. She invites the group to continue their work in the palace gardens. In the open courtyard, tables are laid with copper instruments and glass vessels. A scribe records every word while birds call from the trees above. Cleopatra observes an alchemist heating crushed gemstones over a bronze flame. He explains how minerals might yield color for royal dyes. The queen nods, considering its potential as a symbol of divine wealth. Nearby, two astronomers align polished bronze mirrors to catch the setting sun. Cleopatra joins them, fascinated by the illusion of captured light. A servant brings chilled wine infused with pomegranate and mint. The discussion turns to philosophy, the balance between fate and free will. Cleopatra leans forward, her tone both questioning and absolute. As the sun fades, she thanks her guests, her voice echoing beneath the colonnade. The scholars bow deeply before departing through the shadowed halls of Alexandria's palace. The sun sets behind the marble towers of Alexandria as torches are lit along the palace terraces. Inside the grand banquet hall, servants arrange golden plates and silver cups upon cedar tables. Musicians tune harps and flutes, while the scent of roasted lamb and honeyed figs fills the air. Cleopatra enters through the bronze doors, veiled in white linen embroidered with gold thread. Trumpets sound softly as guests rise from their seats in a synchronized bow. She moves gracefully to the head of the table, her golden crown reflecting the light of the torches. At her signal, the feast begins. Platters of quail, lentils, pomegranates, and lotus cakes are served. Wine mixed with myrrh and cinnamon flows into crystal goblets. Cleopatra raises her cup, offering a toast to the prosperity of Egypt and the favor of Isis. The guests repeat her words, their voices echoing through the vaulted chamber. As they eat, Cleopatra listens to a Roman envoy describing trade routes along the Mediterranean. She answers him with charm and precision, her tone both diplomatic and dangerous. At her left, Greek philosophers debate poetry and power over cups of dark wine. A court musician begins to play a slow melody on the lyre, and dancers enter the hall. Cleopatra watches the dance with stillness, her expression unreadable yet magnetic. The performance grows more intense, echoing the heartbeat of the empire itself. After the final movement, Cleopatra applauds softly, and the hall erupts in music once again. She invites her guests to speak freely, their voices blending with the clatter of silver and laughter. A jester performs a brief pantomime of Roman politics, drawing laughter from the crowd. Cleopatra's smile deepens, her mind weighing diplomacy behind every expression. She signals for a storyteller, who begins a tale of gods, betrayal, and eternal love. The hall quiets, every ear bent toward the voice weaving myth into memory. As the story ends, Cleopatra rises, her figure luminous against the vast mosaic floor. She delivers a short speech, reminding all that feasts are not merely indulgence, but ceremony. Her words echo through the chamber like a decree carved in stone. Guests applaud, rising once more to salute their queen. Cleopatra's gaze drifts toward the open balcony where night has fully fallen. The feast continues behind her, but she steps toward the cool air, silent and watchful. From above, she sees the harbor lights shimmer like distant constellations mirrored in the sea. The palace hall lies behind her now, filled with fading laughter and soft music. She steps onto the upper terrace where the night air is cool and scented with jasmine. Below, the dark waves of the Mediterranean lap quietly against the harbor stones. Cleopatra leans on the marble rail, her bracelets glimmering as she studies the stars. A young astronomer approaches quietly, holding a bronze astrolabe and papyrus charts. He bows and unrolls a map of the heavens upon a marble table. Cleopatra asks about the movement of Venus, the star of morning and love. The astronomer explains its path through the constellations, marking it with a reed pen. Cleopatra listens intently, tracing the celestial lines with her fingertip. She whispers that the heavens mirror the order of kingdoms below. The astronomer nods, awed by her insight and calm authority. A musician joins them, carrying a small harp carved from ebony and ivory. He begins to play a quiet melody that drifts across the open sea air. Cleopatra closes her eyes, the music weaving through her thoughts like silk. Behind her, the palace domes shimmer with gold in the torchlight. The astronomer quietly departs, leaving her alone with the music and the sky. She gazes toward the lighthouse of Pharos, its flame cutting a steady beam through the mist. The sound of the waves and harp blend into a single, timeless rhythm. Cleopatra whispers a prayer to Isis, guardian of wisdom and the night. The flame trembles as if the goddess herself has heard. She smiles softly, feeling both mortal and divine beneath the endless sky. A gentle wind carries the last notes of the harp across the sea. The torches on the terrace burn low, leaving pools of golden light amid deep shadows. Cleopatra turns once more toward the constellations, whispering names of ancient stars. She lingers there, queen of Egypt and pupil of the cosmos. Far below, the harbor lights fade as Alexandria sleeps. Cleopatra remains still, watching the night until the stars begin to turn. The palace sleeps beneath the last glow of the torches. Only the faint sound of papyrus scrolls shifting breaks the silence. In a private chamber, Cleopatra sits before a low desk made of ebony and ivory. An oil lamp burns beside her, its flame steady and bright. Her scribes wait in silence, ready with ink and reed pens. She dictates a decree concerning new grain shipments to the southern provinces. Her voice is quiet, yet carries the weight of an empire. The scribes exchange a glance, impressed by her precision. Cleopatra rises, moving toward a shelf filled with scrolls of philosophy and astronomy. She selects one worn papyrus titled Harmony of the Spheres. Unrolling it carefully, she reads by the soft, trembling light. Her lips move silently as she follows each line, her mind deep in thought. Outside, the sea breathes softly against the marble cliffs. The smell of incense still lingers from earlier prayers. Cleopatra takes a stylus and writes her own notes in the margins. Her words speak of destiny, wisdom, and the fragility of power. A faint tremor of wind enters through the open lattice window. She looks out toward the Nile, now a black mirror under the stars. A thought crosses her mind that even rivers carry memory. She turns back, her face illuminated by the single remaining lamp. The scribes bow and depart silently, leaving her alone. Cleopatra rolls the scrolls closed, tying them with crimson ribbon. She extinguishes one lamp, the room dimming to a golden twilight. From the window comes the first hint of dawn, a faint pale shimmer. She remains seated, watching the darkness retreat. The silence feels sacred, as if the gods themselves pause to listen. Cleopatra whispers a final note to herself about balance and legacy. The first bird calls beyond the palace gardens. She smiles faintly, feeling the birth of a new day. The Queen of Egypt sits in silence, awaiting the sun. And so the day of Cleopatra comes to its quiet end, as one more thread woven into the fabric of history. Empires rise and fall, yet her name endures, carried on the breath of the desert wind. She was not only Queen of Egypt, but Queen of Time, her legend still whispering through the centuries. As the sun rises once more over the Nile, her story begins again, forever. If you felt the breath of history and the voice of the Queen in this journey, remember her day never truly ends. Now, I ask you, what do you think her days were truly like beneath the crown and the legend? Share your thoughts in the comments, and tell how you imagine the world of Cleopatra through your eyes. If her story inspired you, subscribe for more journeys into forgotten empires and timeless queens. This was one day in the life of Cleopatra, but history still holds 1,000 more. Thank you for watching. May the wisdom of the Nile guide you until the next dawn.